Alright, welcome back. Interest groups. Alright, so this video introduces you to the concept of interest group. So what is an interest group? Well, it is an organization that attempts to influence policy for a specific purpose. Notice that that is a specific purpose. We think of political parties and we view them as having more of a broad purpose because they have to win elections, but then they have to appeal to a number of people in order to be able to do so. So interest groups, they are often able to focus on just one or two main topics that are important to them, as opposed to parties that have to have topics or have positions on virtually every topic you can think of. So they want to influence policy similar to parties, but more specifically. Interest groups have been increasing in number and in influence in recent decades. And this unit is going to explore the positives and the negatives of that increasing influence of interest groups. Alright, so before we get into this in any more detail, we want to step back and remember pluralist democracy. Federalist number 10, James Madison, we know he talked about having many groups competing for power as the way to limit the negative influence of factions. Obviously, interest groups and parties are both types of factions, people that are grouping together for a specific purpose. And his argument was we'd have so many different factions, or now we can apply it to interest groups, that no one group would have too much power over our policies. So interest groups embody this idea of pluralist democracy. Again, later in the unit and in a couple of videos from now, we'll explore this a little bit more. Has it worked out this way? Or are there some that have an inordinate amount of influence? Alright, so the next few slides are going to get into some different types of interest groups. So we have first here single issue groups. They are exactly like they sound like they are. These are interest groups that focus their advocacy on a single issue. So the NRA, they're going to keep being my example. I hate to tell you guys, but over and over throughout this unit, I think it's one that we've all heard of and are familiar with. So it'll be a good one for us to focus on, I think. So the NRA, their issue is gun rights and opposing gun control. Another single issue group is the AARP, the American Association of Retired Persons. They focus on advocating for elderly people, for Social Security, for Medicare, things like that. Alright, so we have interest groups that appeal to people based on ideology sometimes. So for liberal ones, now the National Organization for Women, they fight for equal rights for women. Emily's List, they try to get women elected to office. The NAACP, fighting for minority and specifically African American rights. Civil rights movement, they're heavily or closely associated with. And the ACLU, American Civil Liberties Union, which they view themselves as defenders of the Bill of Rights. Anytime that there are things they feel like somebody's First or Fourth or Fifth Amendment rights have been violated, etc., they step in and fight for that. Conservative interest groups, the Christian Coalition, National Right to Life, and the NRA are just a few conservative groups. Alright, we have something called institutional groups, and there's actually 3 subsets of institutional groups. Again, don't go crazy memorizing like all these specific types. This is just to show that we have a lot of different kinds of interest groups, and essentially just to get you the idea that everybody has an interest group. So there are intergovernmental groups. So actually state and local governments, they have their own interest groups in Washington, D.C. that lobby to get federal money for their state and local governments. We have professional associations and labor interest groups like the AMA, the ABA, and the AFCIO, which is American Federation of Labor. We have ones that represent corporations like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the National Association of Manufacturers. So just from that, you see governments are represented, you see professionals, laborers, workers are represented, corporations are represented. They all have their own interest group. We also have ideological, social, and protest movements. So rather than being as specific as an interest group, we have civil rights movements, women's movements, environmental movement, and consumer movements. Each of these as well try to influence public policy for a specific outcome. Alright, make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that like button for me. This has been a La Money production.